So perhaps this is a delayed reaction, as we used to say. But I can say sincerely that Rob Reiner will be missed. Not because his politics aligned with mine, but because he was part of my childhood. Yes, I was a little girl, and before All in the Family was in reruns, it would come on Sunday nights. And when we were living with my grandparents in the Cleveland, Ohio area, you could count on Edith's voice cracking, and those were the days, the theme song of the show, and everybody's applauding. And it's, Norman Lear was a pretty good producer back in the day. And then as I got older, I would come home from school to an empty house, being a latchkey kid. I mean, is it all right to say that? There's nobody around to interact with. I mean, you don't live in a neighborhood where you can play with other kids. Nowadays, kids don't play with each other anyway. They're just all in their video games or smoking pot in the garage or something, so the parents don't know, or hanging out in the playground. It's like I took my kids to the playground a few months ago, just thinking we could walk, and a bunch of teenagers just sitting there. I'm like, oh, why are you sitting on the juvenile fitness equipment? I never did that when I was a teenager. That'd be like being a sweat hog or something. Oh, you don't get the reference. See, some people will get the reference. Some people will. Anyway, I digressed again. That was a reference to the students that Mr. Cotter had on the show. Welcome back, Cotter. Welcome back, doo-doo. Your dreams were your ticket out. I mean, they always had these beautiful music at the beginning of each show. I mean, that's something, I don't know. I mean, sitcoms used to unite us. We all had things we could identify with. We had these common values, although we may have been geographically far flung from one another. We had sitcoms to unite us. There were values that were preached through sitcoms. Sitcoms were wholesome. They really, love thy neighbor as thyself wasn't necessarily said out loud, but you got that idea. Violence wasn't romanticized. They tried to tackle social issues. This is a very important episode of The Facts of Life. They really attempted to do good in society. Isn't that an odd thing? When entertainment ceased to preach to us, when it just wanted to cater to us. But I digress. So when I think of the character of Michael Stivic, which Rob Reiner played on All in the Family, I thought, this guy is so annoying, like, what about his mutton chops and the facial hair, the excessive facial hair like you saw in the Sgt. Pepper's album. Archie was just a larger-than-life character. Archie Bunker, his father-in-law, would just always be pontificating and sounding ignorant and silly and so ridiculous you would just laugh at him rather than hate him. People ended up loving Archie Bunker because he was so ridiculous, because some of us, or at least our parents or our grandparents, could relate to this man and how he felt. And if you think of the theme song of All in the Family, that wasn't really a beautiful song. Did I say it was a beautiful song? Those were the days. You could count on Edith's cracking voice ringing through my grandparents' house on a Sunday night, on a school night. If I was a very good girl and I got a bath, I might be able to come down and watch, as they call it, the Archie Bunker show. But it actually was All in the Family. And it was like a soap opera. Everybody's waiting to see, week to week, well, what's going to happen next with this family? Every actor was great, but at the same time, I have to say it and I have to be fair about this. Love thy neighbor as thyself was definitely a value that they communicated with the show, but there were also values that I was introduced to that I shouldn't have been introduced to. They called it TV programming for a reason, right? They were trying to program you, be open to this and that, just be open, just be liberal, you can go from one extreme to the other. That's the thing. That's the thing. When you take God and the Bible out of the picture, you can go from one extreme, like Andrew Jackson, the Democrat who drove the Indians out west and was merciless toward them. Yes, a Democrat president was merciless to the Indians and broke his promises. And then to the other extreme where he's just like, all Americans are terrible. Let's just tear down the entire society. That's what we need to do, bro. Without the Bible, you don't have a middle ground. You don't have a balance, If you look at the words of Jesus in the Bible, they could be very direct and even harsh. But, if he swung one way toward being harsh towards the Pharisees, he'd be very kind and compassionate toward the downtrodden in society. And I really do believe that in the 1970s, in these sitcoms, they were trying to remake society into a better America where there would be no discrimination, no racism, no anti-Semitism. Nowadays, people don't even try, it seems to me. I noticed that they would introduce really adult topics in these sitcoms to little children. You can't escape that elephant in the room, but let's not talk about it because the elephant is just like, I just want more peanuts. Well, you have plenty of peanuts. I don't need to talk about you right now. The thing they were always trying to push on us. Everything they were advocating in those shows was good to me. Like, don't be a racist. Sometimes people have peer pressure and sometimes they're anorexic and they shouldn't take drugs and everything like that. I agree with those messages, but there's certain messages that seem to attach themselves to those messages. And it was such a subtle thing. But although, one of my most recent videos was about how television really ruined our minds. And I didn't mean that there weren't some very good and happy times watching television. They're always playing that laugh track in the background. Like, ha, 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 even when, when there's a stupid joke and you can't even afford a live studio audience, there's that laugh track, ha, 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 ha. Before long, you didn't know why anybody was laughing and you stopped watching television because it was so inane and stupid. But this message is supposed to be about Rob Reiner. He was an original person. If you look back at the episodes of All in the Family and see how he had his convictions, and although he was the butt of jokes, he stood up to Archie Bunker, and something about that impressed us as Americans, that he stood up to the bigotry and the ignorance and the hatred, dare I say it, of the patriarchy, you know? However, as the man grew older, he only became more successful. When he left his role as an actor, he became a very successful movie director. But he never seemed to lose this rebellious teenage identity. But of course, he wasn't a teenager in the show at the time. Even rebelling against, he would rebel against any male authority figure, and that included our own president, which a majority of people voted for. And it's just heartbreaking. You know, I don't want to share the details. This idea that you always have to have this contentious attitude toward your male authority figure. It's a form of psychopathy, if you ask me. Who asked you? But let's lighten up this conversation a little bit, because I wanted to end it with something light if I could. Even when I was watching reruns of All in the Family, I didn't really understand the lyrics of the opening theme song very, very well. I really didn't know, because they were trying to communicate something that I couldn't relate to as a younger person. It started out with, "Boy, the way Glenn Miller played," and then Archie would say that, and Edith would say, "Songs that made the hit parade." I didn't know what a way Glenn Miller was, but they were talking about Glenn Miller, the big band director. I had no idea. Those were the days, and you know who you wanted. Mister, we could use a man like Herbert Hoover again. I didn't know who Herbert Hoover was. He was apparently the American president during the Great Depression. And there's so much social commentary. And then they ended it with, "G-R-O, a salad break." I misheard the lyrics as G-R-O, a salad break. I thought, well, I reasoned in my juvenile mind that if adults could have coffee breaks at work, maybe in the olden days they had salad breaks. I must have had this discussion with my mom. I might finally have said, "Now, what does it mean, GRO, a salad break, Mom?" No, it's G, our old LaSalle ran great. So a LaSalle is an extinct car, an obsolete car, American car. I've just, everybody's misheard lyrics. People used to listen to lyrics. Lyrics used to mean something. Now they're like, blah blah, bitty bitty boop boop, bitty bitty bop 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 boop boopity boop 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 boop, and then they have like these secret messages. Go and do something crazy. Go do something crazy. Don't worry, I'm not gonna get caught, or whatever. I could make up some of these songs. It's so ridiculous. But again, I digressed. All in the Family was a show that Rob Reiner starred in, and his father, I believe, Carl Reiner, was a director. his loss will be felt very much, because it was as if he and Gloria were members of our family. Regardless of his politics, he's really going to be missed. So thank you for listening. Goodbye.